The air was heavy with heat, thick enough that every breath felt like sipping from a steaming pot. Insects droned relentlessly, and the faint scent of pine resin mixed with smoke from the camp's kitchens. Inside the women's barracks, the atmosphere was a little better. The ceiling fans creaked without much effect, stirring only warm gusts of air. Clara Weiss pressed her hands against the wooden frame of the open window, squinting into the late afternoon sun. What she saw made her blink twice. Across the yard, American guards were unloading crates of yellow fruit. At first, she thought they were some strange kind of tool, or perhaps bundles of ammunition wrapped in paper. But then she noticed their shape, curved, slender, unmistakable once she focused. "Bananas," she muttered with disbelief, her voice sharp enough that several women nearby turned their heads. Beside her, Anna Vogel shifted closer. "Are you certain?" Clara pointed. "Do you not see? Bananas. They're stacking them like potatoes." Anna tilted her head, squinting. "I haven't seen one since I was a child in Hamburg. My uncle bought a single banana for his daughter at a Christmas market. It cost nearly half a week's wages." She gave a small laugh, but it was thin, almost embarrassed. She cried when it spoiled before she could eat it. Clara's lips curled into a cold smile. "And here, look," Americans peel them casually, as if they were bread rolls. "Do you see the guard? He eats two at once. Ridiculous." Another prisoner, a tall woman with cropped brown hair named Margaret, leaned in from a nearby bunk. "Are those really bananas? I thought all such fruit was impossible to get with the war. Imports cut off, ships sunk. They must grow them in this strange climate," Anna suggested. Clara shook her head firmly. "No. Bananas are from colonies. Tropics. Places we never had. They are not serious food. In Germany, they were exotic indulgences. Sweets for children. Carnival prizes. Circus animals eat them." Her voice rose, dripping with mockery. "And here we are, watching Americans serve them like sausages." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the barracks. It was laughter tinged with the unease of women who had already seen too many of their assumptions overturned since capture. The reality of American captivity contradicted everything the Reich's propaganda had prepared them for. Instead of starvation, there was meat and bread. Instead of brutality, there was order and a kind of distant respect. Instead of filth, there were showers and soap. The Americans had already proven different than expected. But bananas, Americans treating bananas as an ordinary staple, this seemed like proof of something else, a childish, unserious culture. Through the open window, the voice of a stocky guard drifted toward them. Sergeant Johnson, sleeves rolled up, was addressing a small group of POWs assigned to kitchen duty. His words were clumsy German, but his tone was enthusiastic. He held up a banana, peeled it, and with deliberate showmanship, laid it across a grill rack. A dusting of sugar and cinnamon followed, and soon smoke curled upward, carrying a sweet, unfamiliar fragrance. Clara wrinkled her nose. "Listen to him. Explaining like it's some art form. They are roasting children's sweets. What nonsense. They may as well be grilling lollipops." Anna's eyes lingered longer than Clara's on the rising smoke. She didn't answer. At that moment, a shadow filled the doorway. Corporal Davis, a young woman with steady eyes, stepped into the barracks. She carried herself with the calm assurance of someone used to skeptical stares. Her German was fluent enough to make communication easy.
"Fräulein Weiss."
"Fräulein Vogel, you are invited to tonight's cultural dinner. Theme, American summer food traditions," Davis said evenly. Clara crossed her arms. "Will there be actual food? Or just more children's treats masquerading as cuisine?" A flicker of something passed across Davis's eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, but she didn't show it. "You'll have to decide for yourselves. Dinner is at 6. She turned crisply and left. The barracks hummed with whispers. Should they go? Was it mandatory? Would refusing offend the guards? Anna turned quickly to Clara. "What if it's a trap? Not poison, no, but mockery. Making us eat like monkeys for their amusement." "We will attend," Clara said firmly, cutting off murmurs around them. "Not for their food. But for the report, we'll send it home one day. Our families must hear how bizarre the Americans are. Bananas for supper. She spat the word like an insult. They'll laugh themselves sick. The recreation hall that evening barely resembled the grim space the women knew. Checkered cloths covered tables, lanterns glowed warmly, and outside the wide doors, fires blazed in half a dozen grills. And everywhere bananas, piled in bowls, arranged in neat rows on trays. Their yellow skins glowed in the lamplight. Some lay blackened on the grills, splitting open to reveal steaming fruit. Others were sliced raw into bowls, paired with cream. A jug of thick banana milk sat on a nearby table. Clara's nose wrinkled. The smell filled the hall, sweet, smoky, spiced. It was not the cloying scent of candy she expected. Instead, it was rich, caramel-like, almost comforting in its warmth. The prisoners shifted uneasily, muttering among themselves. "Ladies," Sergeant Johnson began in broken but careful German, "tonight bananas. From the tropics. Everyday fruit for Americans. Good in summer. For us." He tapped his chest proudly, "normal food." Clara exchanged a scornful glance with Anna. Everyday food? For Germans, bananas were rarities that children saw once a decade. For Americans to serve them in piles was insulting. Johnson lifted a banana from the grill with tongs. Its peel was blackened, the fruit inside golden and steaming. He peeled it open, the syrup glistening. "Who will try?" Silence. No one wanted to be the first. The women shuffled, looking at each other, unwilling to risk humiliation. Then, inevitably, eyes turned toward Clara. She was the ranking woman, the one they always pushed forward when uncertain. Anna gave her a small push. "You must." Clara glared but stepped forward. The banana was hot, syrup dripping onto the tray. She looked at it with suspicion, as if it were a cruel joke. "Just taste," Johnson encouraged, miming the bite. "Banana.
Sweet.
Good."
Clara hesitated.
In her mind, the memory of Berlin flickered, her niece holding a browned, mushy banana bought at great expense, crying when it tasted sour and strange. Bananas were frivolity. Bananas were a disappointment. And yet, the smell now was irresistible. She muttered under her breath, "For Germany," and bit. The taste stunned her. Soft, almost creamy. Sweet, but not childish sweet. The grill had added smoke and richness, the sugar a deep caramel glaze. It melted on her tongue. It was indulgent, decadent, unlike anything she had expected. Her eyes widened before she could stop them. She chewed slowly, deliberately, then swallowed. Anna leaned forward, voice urgent. "Well," Clara swallowed again, fighting to control her face. It is not what I expected." She paused, searching for safe words. "It is pleasant." "Pleasant." Anna scoffed, grabbing her own from the tray. She bit into it, her skepticism written plain across her face, until the taste hit her. Her eyes shot wide.
"Mein Gott.
This is nothing like the banana I tried as a child. It's delicious." The hall buzzed with excitement. One by one, the other women reached for bananas. Laughter broke out as they tasted, their earlier mockery dissolving into astonished murmurs. Even Margaret, who had sworn she would not touch child's candy, devoured hers quickly, sugar dripping down her chin. Clara sank back, chewing thoughtfully. The sweetness lingered, unsettling her certainty. She had come ready to sneer, certain she would despise it. And yet, as the chatter grew around her, one thought pressed against her pride like a splinter. If Americans could make bananas taste like this, bananas she had dismissed her whole life as frivolous, what else had she been wrong about? Perhaps the true foolishness was not in eating bananas, but in mocking them without ever tasting. The recreation hall hummed with voices, some still skeptical, others filled with nervous laughter. After the first bite, the atmosphere had shifted. Clara sat stiffly, determined not to let her surprise show too openly, but around her, the other prisoners leaned forward with sudden eagerness each time a new dish appeared. The Americans were not finished. Sergeant Johnson clapped his hands once to draw attention, and with a broad smile he announced in German that there was more to try. 2 kitchen staff rolled in a tray carrying glass bowls layered with something creamy and pale. Steam still rose faintly from some, while others had been cooled. Clara narrowed her eyes. "What nonsense is this now?" she muttered under her breath. Johnson lifted a spoon, scooped into one of the bowls, and raised a bite for them to see. "Banana pudding," he said slowly, his German careful. "Traditional food. My mother made it. Our grandmothers made it. In America, this is comfort food." Anna whispered quickly to Clara. "Pudding? From bananas? That is not possible. Pudding is made with eggs, with cream, with—" She stopped as she realized that whatever strange concoction the Americans had built, it smelled inviting. A warm, custard-like scent drifted across the tables, mingled with the unmistakable softness of ripe banana. Johnson offered the first bowl directly to Clara. "Taste," he urged. "It is good." Every eye in the hall was on her. She hesitated, then took the spoon. The pudding was pale gold, layered with slices of banana and wafers softened by the heat. She lifted one spoonful cautiously to her lips. The texture was silken, thicker than cream, the bananas within melting against her tongue. The sweetness was rich but not cloying, the kind of indulgence she had never tasted in camp, nor even back in Germany except perhaps at her grandmother's table when butter and sugar had been more plentiful. She blinked once, then again. This, she caught herself before she admitted too much. It is acceptable. But Anna had already taken a bowl of her own. She tasted, closed her eyes, and smiled despite herself. Acceptable? It is divine. It tastes like something from a holiday table. She scooped another bite without hesitation. Around them, murmurs of astonishment spread as more women tried it. One prisoner, a thin young woman named Gerda, gave a little laugh. "This tastes better than anything I ate last winter in Hamburg." Others nodded, their skepticism dissolving with each spoonful. Clara put her spoon down slowly, struggling with the strange feeling in her chest. Part of her wanted to sneer again, to maintain dignity. Yet the truth pressed itself forward. The pudding was extraordinary, comforting, almost tender. She had never imagined bananas could be anything more than childish trinkets. The Americans were watching with satisfaction, clearly enjoying the reactions. Corporal Davis moved among the tables, answering questions in patient German. She explained how bananas arrived through ships at southern ports, how they had been an everyday fruit in America for decades, how families used them in everything from breakfasts to desserts. The German women listened with astonishment. For them, bananas were a symbol of exotic wealth, seen rarely, never tasted fresh except by the very lucky. To hear Davis describe them as common as apples or potatoes unsettled them. Then came the bread. Thick loaves arrived steaming from ovens, golden brown with darker edges where sugar had caramelized. Johnson sliced them open to reveal a soft, fragrant crumb. The smell filled the hall, rich with butter and ripe fruit. "Banana bread," he announced. "For breakfast, for supper, for whenever. This is American family food." Clara had thought she could resist after the pudding, but the aroma was irresistible. A slice was placed before her, warm in her hands. She tore off a piece, brought it to her lips, and felt the moist, tender texture give way. The sweetness was subtle, the fruit lending softness rather than overwhelming flavor, the crust slightly crisp. Her eyes widened again despite herself. She looked down at the bread in her hands, confused. "This is bread," she whispered, as though trying to convince herself. "Bread from bananas." "Yes," Anna replied with a grin. "And it is better than half the bread we ate at home during the shortages." Clara wanted to argue, but she could not. The bread was too good, too comforting. Around the hall, prisoners were murmuring with astonishment, some even laughing at themselves for their earlier mockery. Gerda licked crumbs from her fingers and exclaimed, "All my life I thought bananas were silly. I would trade a dozen rations for another loaf of this." Sergeant Johnson chuckled at their enthusiasm. "Bananas are not silly. Bananas are versatile. You see?" His words were simple, but they carried pride. Clara sat back slowly, watching the scene unfold. The women she had led in sneering earlier were now smiling, even laughing. The guards and the prisoners shared the same food, the same flavors, for a moment not enemies, but humans gathered at one table. It unsettled her deeply. The meal continued with other dishes, sliced bananas served cold with cream, fried bananas crisped in butter, even a thick milkshake blended and served in tin cups. Each new presentation chipped further away at the certainty she had clung to. Clara ate each one with the same stubborn posture, her face tight with restraint, but inside she felt something loosening, some prejudice cracking. When the plates were cleared, Sergeant Johnson raised his voice again. "This is America," he said simply. "Plenty. Variety. Food not only for hunger, but for joy. You see bananas, we see tradition. You think of circus treats, we think of mothers and children, summer and comfort. This is what it means for us." The women were silent for a long moment. Some stared at their plates, some at the guards. Anna finally broke the silence, her voice soft. "All our lives, we thought bananas were a joke. Tonight, I think I will never forget this." Clara looked down at her hands, still sticky from the syrup of the grilled banana. She clenched them tightly, her pride warring with her honesty. She wanted to laugh at Anna, to dismiss it all, but she could not. The food had spoken for itself. On their way back to the barracks that night, the women whispered among themselves. Some were exhilarated, some embarrassed. Margaret shook her head in disbelief. Bananas of all things. Who could have imagined that? Anna smiled. "Perhaps we should not mock before tasting." Clara walked in silence, her eyes on the gravel path. She did not want to admit it aloud, but Anna was right. She had mocked, she had sneered, and now she felt foolish. She thought of her niece again, the child crying over a spoiled banana years ago. How strange that here, in captivity, she had finally tasted what the fruit could truly be. When they reached the barracks, she lay on her cot, unable to sleep. The taste lingered on her tongue, rich and comforting. She stared at the ceiling, wrestling with her thoughts. If Americans could turn something she had dismissed as childish into something so wonderful, what else had they mastered that Germans had ignored? What other assumptions had been wrong? The memory of propaganda speeches floated back, about American weakness, American ignorance, the crude, unrefined enemy. And yet here she was, full from a meal of bananas prepared in more ways than she could have imagined, questioning everything she thought she knew. She turned onto her side, the humid air pressing against her skin, and whispered into the darkness, "What else have we been wrong about?" The question hung unanswered, but it marked the beginning of a change that Clara could no longer deny. The following morning, the women awoke to the familiar clang of the camp bell. The Mississippi heat was already creeping through the thin walls of the barracks, and the smell of coffee drifted faintly from the kitchens. Clara Weiss rolled off her cot, her mind still unsettled by the previous evening. She tried to push away the memory of the grilled banana, the pudding, the bread, but the flavors lingered as if mocking her own stubborn pride. Anna Vogel, cheerful in a way that irritated Clara before she'd had water, leaned across the narrow aisle between beds. "You were very quiet last night." Clara pulled on her shirt, refusing to meet her eyes. There was nothing to say. They fed us circus food, and everyone behaved like children at a carnival. Anna laughed softly. "Circus food? If that was a circus, then I would happily buy a ticket every week." She tied her hair back and added, "Admit it, Clara. It was good. Better than good." Clara didn't answer. She remembered her own words at the table, calling it merely pleasant. Even now, she felt the heat of shame at how thin that sounded compared to what she had truly thought. Later that morning, a group of prisoners, Clara and Anna among them, were ordered to report to the camp garden. This wasn't unusual. The Americans often used POW labor for light agricultural work, planting, weeding, tending to vegetables. It was considered educational, a way to keep idle hands busy. But today, when they arrived, something different awaited them. Sergeant Johnson stood near a shaded bench with Corporal Davis beside him, a chalkboard propped up awkwardly against a wooden crate. Spread out on the bench were several objects: peeled bananas, slices of banana bread, a jar of dried chips, and even a bottle of what looked like thick, golden syrup. The prisoners exchanged puzzled glances. Davis greeted them in her careful German. "Today you learn. Yesterday you tasted. Now you see why Americans eat bananas every day." She picked up the chalk and drew a rough map of the Americas on the board, labeling the Gulf of Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. "Bananas grow here," she explained, pointing.
Costa Rica.
"Honduras.
Cuba. Ecuador.
Every year, millions of bananas shipped north on boats. They arrive in New Orleans' mobile Gulf ports. From there, trains carry them across America. Cheap, quick. For us, bananas are like your apples." Murmurs spread through the POW group. Gerda raised her hand like a student. "Apples? But apples grow everywhere. Bananas do not." "Not in Germany," Davis corrected gently. "But here, with our ports, they come fresh every week. A family can buy bananas for a few cents. Children eat them at school. Soldiers eat them in camps. Not luxury, normal food." The women shook their heads in disbelief. Clara crossed her arms. "So you import them by shipload just to feed children fruit? Wasteful." Johnson stepped in with a laugh. "Not waste. Strong food. Quick energy. Better than candy. My mother gave me a banana when I worked in the fields." He pointed at his own arm, flexing. "Good strength." The prisoners chuckled, though not unkindly. Anna reached for one of the dried slices on the table and tasted cautiously. Her eyes brightened. "It is crisp, almost like sweet bread." Davis nodded. "Banana chips. Last for months. Soldiers carry them." She held up the syrup bottle. "And this? Extract for baking. Bananas in cakes, in breads. A flavor, a tradition."
Klara Skovlid.
The more they explained, the less sense it made to her. In Germany, bananas had been a symbol of unreachable luxury, an exotic trinket. To see Americans describe them with such casual pride unsettled her. It wasn't just the fruit, it was what it represented. Abundance, reach, power. Later, when the demonstration ended, the women walked back toward the barracks under the pounding sun. Gerda still held a small dried chip between her fingers, nibbling it like treasure. Margaret whispered, "Imagine, children in America eat these every day. My little brother once begged for one at a fair. We could not afford it. We bought him an apple instead." Anna shook her head with a smile. "I almost envy their children." Clara marched in silence, but her thoughts churned. She remembered propaganda posters from Berlin, showing caricatures of wasteful Americans surrounded by hamburgers, pies, and fat bellies. Back then, she had laughed with pride at German discipline, at their belief in efficiency over excess. But now, after 2 days of bananas in more forms than she'd known possible, she wasn't so sure the caricatures had told the truth. That evening, during mess duty, she found herself stationed beside Corporal Davis. Together, he spoke of how steamships and refrigeration had turned bananas from exotic rarities into household staples. He described how families in the Midwest, far from any coast, could still find fresh bananas in their shops each morning. He ended by saying, "In America, bananas show what we can do. Bring the world to our table." The German women listened with a mixture of awe and unease. To them, it was more than fruit. It was a reminder of power, of reach, of abundance. Back in the barracks, Anna whispered, "Do you see? This is why they feed us so well. Why do their soldiers never starve? They can bring the tropics to their camps, while our families queue for bread." Clara lay awake again that night, staring at the ceiling. She hated to admit it, but she understood. The bananas were not childish. They were proof. Proof that America's strength was not only in its weapons, but in its capacity to take what the world offered and make it part of daily life. And slowly, against her will, Clara's scorn was turning into something else: respect, even envy. By late September, the sweltering Mississippi heat had softened into cooler evenings, though the air still carried that thick southern weight the German women never grew used to. The banana dinners had become something of a legend inside Camp Shelby. What began as laughter and ridicule had turned into genuine curiosity, and then into something the prisoners could not deny: anticipation. Each week, the cultural exchange nights featured some new preparation: banana pancakes, banana custard, even a strange frozen dessert that the Americans called banana ice cream. Clara Weiss found herself dreading and longing for those nights in equal measure. She dreaded them because every new dish reminded her how wrong she had been, how deeply her certainty about America's foolishness had cracked. She longed for them because, against all her pride, she wanted to taste again. She wanted the soft sweetness of banana bread warm from the oven, the melting richness of pudding layered with wafers, the simple comfort of a raw banana peeled at breakfast. One afternoon, she was assigned to the kitchen alongside Anna Vogel and Margaret. They stood under the watchful eye of Corporal Davis, slicing bananas into thin rounds while a sergeant prepared batter in great tin bowls. Davis explained, "These are fritters. Bananas dipped in flour, fried in oil. Soldiers eat them in the field, families at fairs." Margaret laughed, shaking her head. "In Germany, we fry potatoes, not bananas." "Then perhaps Germany needs to learn," Davis replied with calm humor. Clara said nothing, but when the first fritter came from the pan, golden, dusted with sugar, she took a bite. The outside crackled, the inside melted. She had to fight not to close her eyes in delight. By the time the tray was emptied, Davis gave her a knowing look. "Still circus food?" Clara met her gaze, cheeks hot. "Perhaps a circus I would gladly attend." That night in the barracks, the women could not stop talking. Gerda whispered excitedly that she would beg her parents to buy bananas after the war, if any could be found. Anna said she wanted to learn every recipe so she could make them in her own kitchen someday. Even those who had sworn never to touch the fruit again were now quietly admitting they had been wrong. Clara lay awake listening to the chatter and felt something heavy loosen in her chest. She thought of Germany, of her niece who had once wept over a spoiled banana, of bread queues, of shortages. And she thought of America, its ports filled with crates of fruit, its children eating bananas like apples. She hated to admit it, but she understood now that this fruit was more than food. It was a symbol, a reminder that abundance came not only from land but from vision, from reaching beyond what you thought possible. Weeks passed, and bananas became part of daily life in camp. Prisoners were taught to make banana muffins, to mash bananas into porridge, to dry slices in the sun. Some joked that they would sprout banana trees behind the barracks if given the chance. When Red Cross inspectors visited, several women spoke of the fruit with wonder, describing it as one of the strangest and most surprising parts of captivity. Clara kept her thoughts mostly to herself, though inside, she was changing. She noticed it when she corrected Gerda one evening. The younger woman had called bananas monkey food in jest, and Clara surprised herself by replying sharply, "No, they are not monkey food. They are food, good food." The others laughed at her tone, but Clara felt the truth of her words. In October, a new opportunity came. The Americans announced that a group of prisoners would be sent to work with local farm families, assisting with harvests and learning agricultural methods. Clara volunteered at once, as did Anna. To her surprise, they were placed with a family of German-American descent, the Bowers, who lived on a small farm not far from Hattiesburg. The Bowers welcomed them with cautious kindness. On the first evening, Mrs. Bauer set a simple supper on the table: cornbread, beans, and, to Clara's astonishment, a bowl of sliced bananas with cream. "Every week we buy a crate in town," Mrs. Bauer explained in German tinged with American vowels. "They are cheap. The children love them." Clara stared at the bowl, then slowly spooned a slice into her mouth. The cream blended with the fruit in a way that felt almost decadent. She could not hide her expression. Mrs. Bauer smiled knowingly. "I remember my father saying the same thing you Germans say. Bananas are for children, for monkeys, not for serious people. But once he tasted them here, he never stopped eating them. Sometimes you must believe." On the farm, Clara and Anna learned more about America's abundance. Trucks delivered crates of fruit from the port every week. Stores sold bananas for a few cents a pound. Even poor families could afford them. To the German women, it was astonishing. They thought of their families back home, scraping together potatoes, stretching bread rations, dreaming of butter. And here were Americans treating bananas as casually as cabbage. One Saturday, the Bauers hosted a gathering with neighbors. Long tables were set up outdoors, children ran between rows of chairs, and the air was filled with the smell of roasting meat and baked goods. Among the dishes laid out were, of course, bananas, in pies, in breads, in bowls with cream. Clara helped serve, carrying plates to children who grinned with mouths already sticky from pudding. She watched them eat without ceremony, without reverence, as if bananas were nothing special. It struck her then. In Germany, people had laughed at bananas because they were rare. But here, people did not laugh because they were common. It wasn't the fruit that was childish. It was the perspective born of scarcity. That night, sitting on the farmhouse porch under a wide Mississippi sky, Clara admitted it aloud to Anna for the first time. We were wrong. About the bananas. About more than that, I think. Anna leaned her head against the railing, smiling faintly. I knew you would see it, eventually. When they returned to camp, Clara carried a small parcel from Mrs. Bauer, a notebook filled with banana recipes written in neat German script. For when you go home, the woman had said. Clara held it like treasure. By winter, the war news had grown darker for Germany. Rumors of defeat swirled, of cities bombed to rubble, of families going hungry. In the barracks, the women spoke often of what they would do after the war. Some said they would never eat bananas again, tired of them after so many months. But most, including Clara, said the opposite. They would carry these recipes home, show their families, tell them of the fruit they once mocked and now cherished. In March 1945, as the war neared its end, Clara was asked to help demonstrate cooking for new arrivals. She found herself standing at a table in the camp kitchen, explaining in German how to mash bananas for bread, how to layer pudding, and how to grill the fruit until it caramelized. The irony was not lost on her. Once she had sneered, now she was the teacher. The younger prisoners listened with wide eyes, tasting with disbelief, then delight. After the war, when repatriation began, Clara carried her notebook carefully tucked among her belongings. Inside were recipes and notes about bananas, but more than that, it was a record of her transformation. She knew that in Germany bananas would remain scarce, perhaps impossible to find for years. But she also knew that one day, when trade returned, when markets filled again, she would buy them, peel them, and remember. She would remember the night she mocked Americans for eating circus food, the moment she took her first bite, the slow realization that she had been wrong. She would remember the lesson that food could teach more powerfully than speeches, that prejudice often crumbled when faced with taste, smell, and experience. And perhaps, she thought, standing on the deck of the ship that would carry her home, bananas would not only feed her family. Perhaps they would remind them that sometimes the simplest things, dismissed as childish or unworthy, carried truths about humility, abundance, and the willingness to learn from others. Clara looked out at the ocean, the horizon stretching wide, and whispered to herself, if I was wrong about bananas, what else might I have been wrong about? The question lingered, not as shame, but as hope.